Artificial intelligence is reinventing business as we speak. You can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join Cognitive Path founders Geoff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they chat with AI experts about the latest ideas, trends, and technologies that are creating the future of business today. This is No Brainer.
Hey everybody, this is Geoff Livingston. Welcome to the No Brainer podcast, and it's another summer day, back with my great colleague and amazing human being, Mr. Greg Verdino. How are you today?
I'm good. That's half true, Jeff. And I do understand it's a summer day out there, but I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I have not set foot outside into the sun. So maybe after this, I'll get a little bit of time to appreciate the weather.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't mind the heat. I do mind it when it's spongy and kind of liquidy outside when you walk out there. That's not fun.
Yeah, no, I guess as they say, it's not the heat.
Yes.
The humidity.
It's the humidity. Welcome to the East Coast. So we have an exciting guest today, I understand. Should I roll into our usual commercials before?
Yeah, why don't you do our little promo stuff, and then I'll introduce our guest.
Sounds like a plan. So, folks, we really are excited that you're listening to us. Please share your thoughts with us in a review. We really enjoy that. Like the podcast. It helps get the word out to other folks. Subscribe. And if you want to send us some comments or any other feedback, we do take mail. We do occasionally do a mailbag episode. I think we're probably overdue for that.
We're probably way overdue.
Yeah, we should do one at some point this summer. And, again, you can find us in any of the usual places, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So don't hesitate. Just punch that subscribe, punch that like button. And with that, Mr. Greg, who do we have with us today?
All right. So today we have the inimitable Jack Myers. Jack is somebody that I met many, many, many years ago in the dim, dark days of my advertising career. I'm not even sure what agency I was at the time. I'm thinking potentially Digitas, maybe something even earlier than that in my career. But Jack has been working in and around media and marketing for his entire career, really. He is sort of a renaissance man. He is a media ecologist. He is the founder, the creator, the CEO, whatever you might want to call him, of both the Myers Report and Media Village, both incredible assets for the media and marketing industry. He is working as an advisor, a leadership coach. He is, I believe, also a lecturer at the University of Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. And somehow in the course of all of this, he does have time to do things like write books. His most recent book is called The Tao of Leadership. Yes, I actually read it. I read it on 2 train rides in and out of the city. Quick read, but packed with insights. And we're really excited to welcome you to the program, Jack. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I followed your career, and I'm so impressed with the success you're having with the work you're doing. You mentioned you read my book. You're one of the 1% of people who buy a business book actually ever read it. So you're part of the 1%. Congratulations.
I know it's sad.
And I'm honored to be here with you.
It is.
Thank you for inviting me.
It is sad how few people actually read, let alone buy, but read business books today. And maybe that's something we'll get into at some point in this conversation, or we can have a whole separate conversation about it. But I think it is in some ways a sign of the times that people just like to have their answers given to them by
Well, it's an interesting point. And, the fact many people are listening in Audible now. There are over 200,000 business books published in just the U.S. every year, and about 60,000 of them are published professionally, the rest. And, we all like to have impressive books on our shelves. I'm happy if someone buys my book and put it on a shelf. I think that's a win, so I'll take it.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't we dive in with the book? I know the book is not pure Taoism, of course, but you've taken some of the key principles that underlie Taoism and you've kind of translated them into the world of business, and particularly into what it means to lead in the age of AI. So what about Tao made that especially relevant to you as a framework in these days?
Well, I guess 3,000 years of continued relevance and modeling for individuals and organizations is a good track record that it's been around this long and people have followed it. We've gotten away from it in the corporate world. And there are core principles that really resonated with the core principles that I had developed independently around how leaders need to adapt and adjust for this looming age that I call techno-intelligence. So harmony, flexibility, integrity, stability, balance. And I think it's that balance that's most important. What I really liked about Taoism as I was understanding Lao Tzu and the teachings is this idea of lead by following. It's counterintuitive for leaders to say lead by following. We instantly go lead by following other people, but it's not. It's lead by following, in this case, the technology, because we used to be able to plan, to organize, to have 5-year plans and to have goals. It's moving so quickly. The technology is advancing so quickly that we really need to let the technology lead us and let us focus as leaders on the human aspects of the business and the organization.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts, Geoff? Because I know Geoff, I'll just say this, I'll promote Geoff a little bit. We're recording this on the 19th of June, Juneteenth. And just this week, I believe Geoff published an article on our Substack about curiosity and the importance of curiosity, which is a fundamentally human capacity. And I know you point to these human capacities as well throughout the book. So I'd love your perspectives on this, Geoff.
Yeah, no, I like the perspective that Jack's bringing to bear, and not to play kumbaya, but I mean, I'm formally ordained, I guess, in Zen, and have studied it, and I've also studied a fair amount of Taoism, although I will say, and it's embarrassing, my favorite Tao book is the Tao of Pooh.
The Tao of Pooh.
Although there's also the Day of Piglet.
It was the Tao of Pooh that led me into, learning a little about Taoism. And ultimately, I had the title before I had the book.
Yeah. The Benjamin Hoff's book is a really manageable, easy way to get into it. And I actually gave it to my kid, and unfortunately they did the usual teenager thing.
Yeah, my philosophers are Pooh and Pogo. So,
and I'll say, since we're on it, I'm looking on the bookshelf on the other side of my office, which has plenty of books I've purchased and never read. I do have the Tao of Pooh, and I'm sad to say Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, okay. I'm a Thich Nhat Hanh guy with the Zen stuff, so I've met him and all that stuff, but before he passed, obviously, and we still miss him quite a bit. But long story forward, let's move to what we're talking about with AI in particular in this technology age.
I recommend Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. That's another good one.
This is cool. I mean, this is why I love podcasting, folks, because you can get really serious and really take yourselves very seriously with podcasting, but it really should be a coffee chat, and I hope our listeners are enjoying this. It's the way it should be, and that's business and good relationships happening. But to your point, Jack, when I think about this, I also think about like this negative vibe that's come with AI, and part of that's because of the historical legacy of it as a science fiction dystopian future that the media has definitely drum up. But there's just a lot of negative vibes about it and a lot of drama. And to me, it's almost like the Tao of it, like the yin and the yang. I almost feel like the opposite side of it is that it's really a long horizon to this. And this is an opportunity to become more relaxed in our work if we embrace it, rather than fight it. This is this massive sea change, a tsunami coming at us. And I feel like it's more for those that are really getting into it, like walking into the wading pool, and the water's not that cold, and it can really make things easier. It's almost like, to your point, letting the technology lead by just following it. It makes it much simpler and it's less intrusive. It's almost like if we turn off the news and actually experience it rather than talk about it, it's such a different experience altogether. It's the opposite.
Things to unpack there, Geoff. One, you mentioned wading into the pool, and I've drawn for many years the analogy of the lily pond. with the, the lilies grow under the surface. You can't see them. And then,
In the mud, yeah.
yeah, and then one or two lilies will pop up on the surface, and you go back a day later and there's 100 lilies. I think with AI, we're still the 2 or 3 lily pads on the surface. And the second part to unpack there is the idea of people, waiting. And I think many leaders who have been around for a couple of decades and through the internet explosion and the metaverse are today thinking there's another shoe to drop, and that shoe is going to be the implosion, the downturn. And so in my advisory work with C-suite, the one thing that I'm really working with them on is that there is no implosion coming here. There may be economic implosion for some of the companies that are investing. Maybe there's some overinvestment, but overall, I think the common thread among those who are really like you, who are really working in the space, I think we all seem to agree that if anything, it's been underhyped, not overhyped. And the underhype may be doing leaders a disservice by not allowing them or thinking they don't need to focus on how quickly things are moving and how quickly their organizations are going to be disrupted, not just by technological change, but generational shifts, regulatory shifts, environmental shifts. So there's so much going on that leaders have to be aware of today that I think, to your point, I think you can almost put the technology, take a breather and say, this is just going to keep going. And as long as we've got our organizations and systems set up to embrace, accept, and move with it and follow the technology, then we can focus in on the human aspects of our organization.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
love it. Love it. I mean, so many things there to unpack. I think, one of the things that you reference, though, is the speed at which the change is happening, right? And, that can be overwhelming for people, certainly. And you have a concept in the book that I really like, which is, this idea of building portals rather than bridges. We always talk about building a bridge to the future. And as Geoff, being in the Virginia area, knows, sometimes bridges fall down. They take a very long time to rebuild. But that was a terrible, terrible thing to say. But nonetheless, like bridges do take time, right? It's like this massive, sometimes multi-year, and that we may not have time for that anymore. Can you kind of expand on that concept and talk a little bit about what that means for a leader who is trying to prepare their organization for the future?
Yeah, portals, not bridges. I think, bridges connect 2 points, 2 familiar points, a point where you're starting and you have clarity about what you're building to. The speed that AI and technology is moving, by the time, a bridge takes incremental change, and organizations have been designed for incremental change you can plan, change you can organize for. There isn't the time or the reality to be able to do that, because once you take whether it's 6 months or 5 years to build a bridge, you're building it typically in the tech world to a bridge to nowhere, because the destination has changed. So I recommend portals. It's intelligence itself is being redefined. So the idea of hierarchical tech charts, static job roles and tasks, what I call for is a more human-centered focus and I use the phrase fusion flow. Organizations need to look across all their disparate silos where there's common threads and fuse them. And then part of the Taoism is the flow. The water flowing in the river hits a rock, doesn't wait a long time to try to either, build a bridge across the rock or break down the rock. It goes around it. It flows around it. It finds new paths, new models. And that's the way I think organizations need to respond, by moving quickly, opening portals, not just for the leaders to move through, but to inspire their teams to move through with them. And that's where I think the idea of building bridges is taking too long. It's too highly structured. It's too hierarchical. Portals, you can take the technology, you can move quickly, and you can adjust constantly as the technology advances ahead of you.
In your mind, is that building a yes culture instead of one that's quick to say no?
I spent some time over the last couple of decades in Hollywood, and there was a time when I was producing some films. And one of the things I learned about Hollywood, it's the land of the soft no. No one says no. Because they don't want to be the one that missed the script or that missed this opportunity. So it's not necessarily saying yes, but it's avoiding the soft no and the no decision model. Either yes or no. And if it's no, then understand what the implications are, what you're waiting to see. And if it's yes, then you got to have an organization that's prepared to move quickly. And that's probably more of a top-down model than a bottom-up model, that so many organizations are so heavily siloed into multiple P&Ls that no one really has that clear corporate North Star.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, now I know why they call it DC, the Hollywood for ugly people.
That's bad. Yeah,
but it's true.
Yeah, I suppose it is to an extent, right? What, I guess in that regard, I guess what I'm hearing there is sort of this sense that being decisive in both decisions and actions is going to be critical to moving quickly. I mean, that seems obvious. From your perspective, though, what else what other behaviors or beliefs even does a leader need to embrace in order to kind of get to that point where they kind of get into like this, sort of adaptive state where they can, kind of have fusion and flow, work in harmony, in their organization and really move their organization forward at the speed these times demand?
It's the important question you're asking, Greg, and I think one of the challenges is that corporate leaders are not incented to have a long-term strategy. They're not incented to make high risk or even risky moves. They're risk averse, and that's because of Wall Street. The vast majority of leaders of public companies today are incentivized by Wall Street performance, and that means you're delivering quarterly numbers, which means you're going to stay on course. I like you and I, and we've all spent a lot of time in the media industry and in the legacy media, and I lovingly refer to it as legacy media and the television networks. The common thread is that they've been really, really skilled over the last 2 decades at managing decline. And you could stretch that out, in managing against Wall Street expectations. And their incentive for delivering on goals that have really nothing to do with their organizational growth or long-term success. So that mind shift of what are the incentives that a leader is working toward. And in a public company, it's pretty hard to break away from those Wall Street goals. But a couple things you can do is one, redefine creativity. It's no longer a lone genius act. It's something that is a dance between human intuition today and machine suggestion. And creativity becomes into how you load the prompts, how you ask the questions, how you respond to the deliverables, how you grow the ideas based on your own intuition, your own creativity, your own ingenuity, your own insights. And so the very context of creativity within an organization, and that leads to more human-focused leadership. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of pushback against DEI and gender equity. That's happening in the universities by law. It's happening in corporations because it's easier to follow that model rather than invest in education and long-term planning. So I think when leaders really focus on psychological safety, rewarding experimentation and moving through portals, consolidate their organization across capabilities, break down silos, and frankly, give teams permission to remix AI's generative power with the human component. And and that really unleashes an energy that outpaces what so many leaders focus on is fear, not only their fear, but the fear they inspire if people don't meet their numbers.
I sense that we're kind of in a more fear-based era right now, where there are times where the business culture and the business discussion that happens in the United States in particular sometimes can be very positive or more towards innovation and growth. And currently, I just feel like we're in this period where it's a little more cut margins, marginalized, it's opportunistic, it's very, I would say, unworker friendly, the tone of the conversations that we're seeing today. Do you see this as an ebb and flow? I mean, within the Taoist context, what's your take on that?
Well, you could also answer that. I think you asked the question, and maybe you know the answers there in terms of the Taoist as context. But I would shift. First of all, the political realities and regulatory realities around fear are very real, and I think of significant concern. And fear is the right response in that context to some of the things that are going on in our political environment, not just in the U.S., but globally, I think. But let's bring it into the organization model. And instead of the word fear, I would import the word data. And I think you could revise your question, just take the word fear and move it to data. Companies and organizations and leaders have become so data dependent and so focused on data. And a lot of your world at your work revolves around data and the connection to the cognitive realities that data builds and leads us to. But I think the dependence on data for decision making leads to a diminishment of the role and value of the human being. But it's the human analytics that and the human intuition and the conversion of the data into decision making that has different goals other than what are the data points we need to present to Wall Street or to our bosses. And if we reduce the dependence on data and use AI and the tools to take the data and help us evolve it into decision making that is human directed, then I think we change the fear or the data to more humanistic management goals without necessarily eliminating the importance and reality of Wall Street demands. Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I think the more businesses can focus on data and factual information as much as possible, or as it's interpreted, because, there's always a perspective, right, on data. But I think the better and easier it is for them to make decisions, the more they kind of get caught into, we saw this, we saw that, this is what people are talking about, the less effective they can become.
My mentor and professor at NYU in media ecology, Neil Postman, who wrote a number of books, one of which is Technopoly, which actually predicted and warned us of some of the challenges that would be developed when we have this kind of technopolistic society. And what he said is information, and this was 3-4 decades ago that he wrote, information has become a form of garbage, really useful for performing the most meaningless tasks. It's those tasks and that information that AI is going to take on and manage. So today we need to be figuring out where's the wisdom, where's the knowledge, where are the guidelines that can help us set, new goals, new opportunities that are a little more long-term.
Love that.
So where, today, if you had to place your bet somewhere, where do you put that line between the data and the humanity, or the fear and the hope, or you can almost spin it a number of different ways. Where do you draw that line as a leader in an organization who's trying to figure out how do we maintain, if not actually escalate or enhance, the humanity of the organization?
It's a great question. And so much of business today is being built on procurement-based efficiency. And not just in the world that I know best, media, and that you're so familiar and comfortable with, but across all supply chain management, efficiency is the number one goal and factor. So what I recommend to companies that are open to hearing it is intentional and managed inefficiency. Look for the opportunities, and especially the creative areas where you're not optimizing or maximizing your efficiency, but you're recognizing and valuing areas and opportunities that are not meeting your efficiency goals, that are premium, that are more value, that don't improve your efficiency, but also don't necessarily drive your sameness. That if you look for the inefficient opportunities that are going to drive your point of differentiation. And many years ago, I was consulting for one of the top 5 advertisers in the world. $2 billion invested in advertising, and this goes back a couple decades. And what he said to me was 95% of his advertising budget was for parody. 5% is where he sold his product. Wow. And so I think if we look at that 5% or 10%, especially at legacy media companies looking at our inventory, where do we have the opportunity for brands or for organizations to create differentiation, to have an edge? I think too much of our business model today is optimizing for sameness, and that you're speaking and interacting with the machines instead of with your teams.
Yeah. That, I guess, in a way almost bridges us to the subject of creativity in a way. I mean, obviously sameness can be combated with, in a whole variety of ways, innovation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, even the point of like where friction becomes, a benefit, not a harm in a given process. But, certainly there's creativity. Now, you've written 2 books recently, right? One is the Tao of Leadership. The other is Creativity Unleashed. And I know one is more of a leadership book, top down kind of. The other is really for the people making the sausage in the factory. How do you actually embrace AI tools and whatnot? I'm wondering, have we hit that point yet, in your opinion, where creative professionals are truly harnessing the creative potential of the tools rather than just using it to create more sameness?
Are we there today?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the accurate description of the Tao of Leadership and Creativity Unleashed. I appreciate that.
It's a second book for everybody to buy.
Tao of Leadership on July 1 for a couple months is going to be marked down to $1.99. So, go grab it now. Has creativity currently is it being unleashed? Is it being used? Not even close. Yeah. I look at the ad agencies that continue to separate their media from the creative process. I look at the creative process that's out there. It's pretty embarrassing right now, while we're on this conversation, and you mentioned the date, Geoff, many people in the media advertising marketing community are in Cannes for the Festival of Creativity.
Right.
Well, when you're in the Palais and with the creative teams, it's all about awards. It's all about creativity, which is great. You walk out of the Palais and you walk along the Percet, you go to the hotels, you go along the beach, you go up into the hills, and the media industry has taken over, and there is no creativity in media today. Media buying is a data-driven. There's no creativity in it. And I think there's so many places where creativity, it's no longer, creativity is being inappropriately described as something that's limited to the creators or the idea people or the musicians or the authors. But it's changing. It's no longer about having individual ideas. It's about the ability to interact creativity with machines, with collaborators, with uncertainty. And, we hear always AI is a partner, not a replacement. It's not going to take away jobs. It's going to take away jobs, but it's going to add to the type of work that is available and to do. But the people, the creatives who are making the move are in the advertising business are the independent agencies where media and creative intersect and where they work together and collaborate. And those who succeed are those who are going to know how to prompt it, challenge it, remix it, update its outputs, and layer their own human context and emotion into it. And I don't think we've made that move yet at all in any context.
Yeah, I think too, to some extent, it's subtler than people realize that it's happening. I'll give you an example so that that subtlety kind of becomes clear. So Greg knows I'm a little bit of a shutterbug as a creative hobby. It's definitely my outlet. Love grabbing that camera and going for like a good hour or two, at least once a week, just to get centered. And yesterday I was in Lightroom, which is Adobe's standard software for it. And all of a sudden, now they have all these filters that will automatically detect and change your image for you as part of its dodging and burning tool set. And I think if you're a photographer that doesn't know what AI is, you're just like, oh, that's really cool. That's some really powerful stuff that's going to save me a lot of time, right? Now, because of my professional background, I instantly knew what was happening with that. That's a lot of AI they're unleashing on people's editing. And that AI is going to be interpreting their photos and interpreting how it should be executed. That doesn't mean, in my book, at least, that it's going to become homogenized AI slop. It just means that somebody got a power tool and can do different things with it now. So I think it's really in the context. On the opposite side of it, my kid, who's a bassist, refuses to use like Autotune or any other of those AI music creativity apps, even though they are a bit of a songwriter, and they're actually a camp counselor for songwriting at their School of Rock camp. Long story short, they just refuse it. They will never let AI touch their creative outlet. I think when we go into this with the mindset, and again, this is a very down conversation, right? It could be all or none, or it could be the natural evolution of things, right? And we see this all the time in museums. Do you remember the first time you went to a museum and you saw like a film camera set up and they're using like lights on the wall and weird little images, and very modern? I don't mean to call it weird, but just a different interpretation of the way people use that tool set to communicate a concept or the way they feel about something. And it's clearly art. It clearly makes you think differently about the idea, and at the same time, completely something I would never have thought to use. I think when we get into the outliers with this stuff, when people, to your point with media buying, suddenly break through and do something completely different, that causes everybody's head to turn, and we know it's going to happen, and it's going to happen faster than people think.
Well, it's moved 37 and go. And how the computer a decade ago, made a move that was so non-intuitive that, or was completely intuitive and was part of the training model, that we began to see that, the evolution is going to be ahead of the human ability to adapt to it. So I think what you're describing with your daughter is epidemic in Hollywood and in the creative world, where people are saying, I'm not, to use AI. I draw the analogy in library sciences to librarians saying, we're going to go find those books ourselves. We're not going to use the Dewey Decimal System. Of course, now there's no books.
Yeah, there is no Dewey Decimal System.
But the decision to not even be familiar with the tools. My grandson is a brilliant guitarist and going on tour this summer at 16 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I hear a proud relative there.
Yes, and my son is in Hollywood and no AI. So I gave my grandson Creativity Unleashed, and in it there are 5 or 6 AI tools specifically designed for musicians. And I said, don't use them necessarily, but at least know what they are and what they do, because it's going to improve your editing ability. It's going to improve your sound, your ability to sound mix. It's going to change the nature of how the tools you have, collaborative tools you have. You don't want to take away his guitar pick,
right?
And say, I'm not going to use a pick. To say I'm not going to use AI, that's fine. I congratulate that. But to not know the potential that the tools offer, is just to me a career disaster.
I totally agree. Totally agree with that. And it's funny because Hollywood's had this problem before. I mean, we saw that with Netflix, and
they eliminated the whole strike was about eliminating AI from the writer's room. but they also cut back the size and number of people who could be in the writer's room. So why not add AI as one of those members of the collaborative team and just allow it to provide input and direction and guidance through the creative process? That's self-defeating in a number of ways.
Yeah. And it's, as I'm listening to the two of you go back and forth on this, it's just in my head. I always have this, there's that statement that's been made over and over and over again about how AI won't take your job. A person who knows how to use AI will take your job. And it always seems somewhat disingenuous to me. On the one hand, right, we've got, yes, everyone needs to upskill, build their literacy around these new technologies. As you said, Jack, in the book, you name check 5 specific technologies for songwriters, right? But I know, as someone who is a many decades on and on failed musician who has spent more than, I don't even want to talk about how much money on music software, I know that if I use Isotope to mix or master a recording, that's got AI embedded all over it. It's exactly what Geoff is describing with Lightroom, that the typical photographer probably doesn't go into Lightroom and think I'm using AI any more than you get into, I don't know, a BMW and think I'm in an Internet of Things device, right? The technology is just invisible, embedded into all these things, so everyone is using AI,
right,
in a sense. There will be power.
And we have been, by the way.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's like there is no person who is using AI relative to a person not using AI. You might be using it better. You might understand how you're using it more than you might be more effective at. But the reality is, it is almost ambient at this point, in that, AI is just embedded in a lot of ways into the way we're living and the way we're working. And the question becomes, how do you, as a creative, and to your point, I consider just about anybody in business to be a creative, not with a capital C, right?
I mean, I definitely think my accountant's very creative.
Right, exactly. And the fact they've kept you out of jail, I think, is the sure sign of that.
I'm so happy the IRS got Doge, because that's definitely not.
No, I really like the accountant message, because one of the business areas that's going to be dramatically impacted, law and accounting. And the good news for your accountant is that all the data that she or he needs to be creative was human created up until now. And increasingly they've been, the QuickBooks and all the different tools and services, as they become more AI embedded. All that work is going to be a higher degree of accuracy, but you still need the individual to check it, to make sure it's accurate.
When we were first talking about ChatGPT, and this was a couple years ago, we kept talking about it raising the bottom of writing, right? It raises the bottom for minimal viable product. It doesn't create excellence. And that's because it will always perform to the median, right? It is ultimately, and that's what drives me crazy about the whole trend name of AI. It is not intelligent. It is a probability machine. It is literally...
I am going to push back on that.
Okay, let's go. I want to hear that.
Finally, something good.
Here we go.
Yes, the answer, you're absolutely correct. It has only looked at what it has in its system, in its knowledge base, to be able to provide you with a compilation and a condensed and a focused version of that. So it is very methodical in its approach. As I said, the lilies under the pond, what's coming up is co-intelligence. And I do believe within 5 years, it may be 2, it may be 3, it may be days and weeks away, more sentient. And there was pushback in Meta, because someone released that the Meta software that is being developed is sentient, and they pushed back on that. But I do believe that the tools, resources that are being developed, and I watch Meta and what Zuckerberg's doing with his investment.
$100 billion salary.
And his acquisition of scale, which I mean,
it's the LeBron moment for AI researchers. And God bless them. They should make every penny they can.
He's still putting $1 billion a year into the metaverse, which is no one else paying attention to or investing in.
And you never know how that's going to turn out, remember?
There's
AI,
going to be.
I mean, video calls people said would never happen, and here we are.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Second World. I don't know if you guys remember
Second
Second
Life.
World.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
we
Greg's a
that type
veteran
of
at that.
My Second Life avatar is probably still floating there in the metaverse someplace.
There are a bunch of stories there, I'm sure, and I have a few. I still have an avatar in Second Life. I go there maybe once every couple of years. It's still active. It's
Still
still
there.
around.
Yeah, that's the
Still
funny
there.
thing is it's
And
still
it's amazingly sophisticated, virtual world. So I believe we're on the verge of sentience, where the AI capabilities to be intuitive, to be creative, and to generate new ideas will create a. What interests me is the generation being born today. I call them the Nexus generation. I wrote a book called Hooked Up, which was about the first research done on what emerged as Gen Z, the first internet generation. I call them the N-Gen, the internet generation, the engine of the next century of economics. But today, the Nexus generation being born into an AI world, using AI, are going to be incredibly sophisticated at having machines as their collaborators, their partners throughout their whole life. And the first thing that has to change to keep up with them is education. You put them into today's educational system and tell them they shouldn't be using the tools of AI. It's reverse. It's of what should be
It's
happening.
counterintuitive for sure.
Yeah. I
So-
mean, this is for kids that are still being told not to use phones, right?
I'm gonna offer my parry though, because I don't disagree with you, Jack, on the possibility of AGI or artificial general intelligence, whatever, thinking machines. Okay, really thinking intelligent machines. I do think that the current approach with LLMs is flawed, fatally flawed, and so it's going to take a different technology in my mind. And there's enough research
Technology then different from what?
to drive the actual thinking. So in my mind, when I look at an LLM as a principal thinking engine behind decision making, it's tragically flawed and will never recover. And Apple just released a massive paper on this about a week ago.
Well,
And it just was backed by, I think, Salesforce, which with their own agent force work, which showed they had a second study come out. Both of them showed the flawed LLM thinking. So it's definitely something that's possible with neural networks. It's not possible with the open AI model.
no argument there. I think OpenAI, with their acquisition, merger, deal with Johnny Ive and his company, think as you do that something new and different has to be created. But I believe it will be. I think that's the difference. I believe that different level of co-intelligence is on the near-term horizon.
See,
not the
we
long.
agree. I don't know why you said you disagree. We agree.
It always
it's all
works
sort-
out that way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You always
it's all-
come full circle. And
Yeah.
if only the world acted like that right now, if only, the right and the left could
Oh
find
my
those
gosh.
common paths, we'd all be better. And I do think AI will contribute to that. Maybe it needs that new, more embedded tool, or brain, that third brain.
But I guess I think maybe by the very nature of the fact that we've been at this a long time, thinking a long time, have been up and down through cycles and peaks and troughs and all that stuff, it naturally brings us to thinking about the future and what's next. Like, that's the irony. Those of us with the gray hair or no hair are the ones who are kind of thinking about what's coming down the pike and what might it mean. So it's probably a good chance to kind of turn our focus for a little bit before we run out of time to the future, right? And from your perspective, Jack, I mean, you've worked with a lot of industries who have kind of stagnated or stalled or are struggling. What does it take from your perspective for an organization to really find its place in that future?
Well, obviously, that's a great question. I'd say what excites me most is that AI, and this goes back to the conversation, Geoff, it isn't just reshaping what we do, it's reshaping what's possible. And we're already seeing emergence of categories like agentic advertising, where AI not only personalizes content, but negotiates and delivers it in real time. We're seeing co-pilots that partner in creativity. But I think the big opportunity is where technology intersects with humanity, and where the human aspects are that have been forgotten in organizational models that have moved more toward data, more toward silos, more toward heavily task-oriented. And as AI takes over the task, you talked earlier about, the top level, and AI will do the bottom level. That is true. But if we think of AI as a prism that is opening up a world of new, a world of difference. And if we come to the point of using AI not just to perform certain tasks that we have the ability to perform ourselves, to ask AI, in this need, in this model, in this work I'm doing, what's possible? So when I wrote Creativity Unleashed, I used my students at the University of Arizona and some research to say, where are the obstacles? Where are those rocks in the river in terms of those boulders that are preventing you from doing something or that you're concerned about? Writer's block. To your daughter's needs, Geoff, the creative opportunities or helping me advance past a certain level of skill or of talent in my music. If you open up the possibilities, and so when I wrote that, I then took all those obstacles and problems and I went into AI, into ChatGPT, and I said, here's the problem. How can you solve this problem? What are the exercises that you can share? What are the tools that are available? What are the tips that I can share back to the person who is experiencing this issue, this concern, this problem, including the idea of not wanting to use it at all? What do you say? What do you do? So AI can answer those questions. And to those who say, what's going to happen to my job or my career with AI? My answer is simple. Go ask AI what you should do. Put your own bio in, put your skills, put your interests, let it guide you. And I think if we think of AI as a partner, a collaborator, a friend, a colleague, and build out our own personal profiles with AI, as we increasingly can do, and let it help us. Let it help us, even if it's a personal situation in a relationship. It can help guide. It can help answer. And yes, Geoff, it can use all of its experience and knowledge that it's built up. But I do think,
training data.
I do believe that, this generation being born now is growing up in a different world, and they'll have a different DNA as it comes to how they, and singularity with what Ray Kurzweil and his colleagues are doing with singularity, I think is on the same page there in terms of let's reinvent what AI is in the medical world and in the biological realities. And then how do we begin in the neuroscience context of understanding the brain, and how do we tap into the skills and advance the brain?
Very good.
I think that's probably a good note to end on, because I don't know if we can get any bigger than that, right?
It's pretty awesome.
So, Jack,
we can get our brains bigger. I think that the reality is we all know we only use 10 to 20% of our brain.
I use about 3 or 4.
Jack,
I'm with you on that. So
we definitely have to have you back next time there's a real big breakthrough with AI, and just have that coffee chat. This was a great conversation today.
Fair enough. And I would like to invite you guys. I mentioned that I'm publishing a series of profiles in leadership, video podcasts at Media Village and YouTube. We've got a really good one coming up next week, but I'd really like you guys to join me.
We would be honored. Absolutely love it. So for anybody listening, Jack's latest book, If You Were a Leader, The Tao of Leadership. If you are a creative or want to think like one, there's Creativity Unleashed. Jack, where else can people find you? There are many, many places, but if somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best option?
JackMyers.com, MYERS, JackMyers.com.
Perfect. And we'll provide links to the books, to the website, and to probably anything else that's Jack Myers related. It's about half the internet, but we'll get all those links into the show notes at nobrainerpodcast.com, where you can, of course, also reach out, connect with us if you would like to. Geoff, do you want to show us on out the door?
Can I interrupt?
Oh, sure.
For showing us out the door, just to say the work you're doing in the space that you're in, I believe is the one that's leading us and leading organizations to this next phase, this burst of creativity. You know, one thing we didn't talk about, and I'll just add 30 seconds, the fact that with every major technological disruption back to the printing press, there's been a commensurate explosion of creativity. It's late. It's coming. And when it hits, it's all going to focus back on the neuroscience and on the cognitive and on where you become a partner with AI. And I don't call it AI, I call it techno-intelligence. I think it's a more accurate term.
Very cool. I love it.
Very good. Awesome. Good coda.
Yeah, let's get on the boom. And if you are with us on this note, please do find us on socials, find us on your favorite podcast network. Listen, like, share, subscribe, and review. We greatly appreciate it. We are out of here. Have a great day.